on the fid around it. And then once you get your fid around and clean up the edges, again, you're gonna, in a circular motion, because if you go on it like this or like that, you're gonna take the glazing out of the channel, you know, out of the heart. So you wanna do it in a circular motion. That way you just keep pushing everything back into itself. The other thing is you can see, that the lead is really getting cleaned up. Now, I'm not gonna turn on the vacuum cleaner because I use a small shop vac and I suck up all this dust, but I will say this, as soon as I get finished with this, we're gonna show you how we apply the reinforcing rods to this particular window and get that finished and get this off the table today. So again, this is Ed. I'm here in the stained glass room at Conway Glass, and we're working on phase 2 of the Merle's Inlet project. Hey, we're back in the glass studio and we're applying the reinforcing rods to the window here. And so this window is 36 inches wide, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna insert a vertical rebar every 12 inches. So it really doesn't affect the sight line of the window because it's behind it anyway, and it has to be part of it. It's not just something that we want to do because we like to do it. It needs to be done. Now, these windows are 11.5 feet long, so this is why we're using a vertical bar all the way across. So the center section, which is 65 inches long, will have 4 rebars running vertical. So, and then we have how they're joined together with our H channel, which would be at another 12 inches. So everything structurally should work out. And so we're gonna just show you how we apply the rebars to these windows here. So first of all, we've taken them, cut them the length that we need, and we know that we're working with a 1-inch stop on the job. So I've notched out the rebar 1 1/8 on each end. And then we're gonna apply, and then I've marked in 12 inches because we want that to be, has to be straight. And then I've went down and I took my brush, I laid this out, and wherever I wanted to, probably on, let's see, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, on 16 joints going vertically, I have marked my rebar that goes right here. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna take our flux. We're gonna take our ruby flux. So we're gonna take our ruby flux and we're just gonna flux these 3 areas right here. Now keep in mind, I've got my iron, my wattage control, my iron temperature control sitting on about a 9 right now because we're working with the steel and it needs to be a little bit hotter than just working with the lead. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna go straight down, and then we're gonna come straight up, and we're gonna make like a little, just a little pile there. Same way with this. Okay. So when we make that little bump there, when we go to apply it to the lead, it'll actually form like a wave and go down onto the lead and kind of roll and stay right on the reinforcing bar. And it makes a really pretty, it makes a pretty look. Okay, so we're just gonna take this, and if you notice, I have a damp sponge. This is a damp sponge. It's not wet. But if I get some stuff on here, when you clean your tip, you don't have to like play around with it. You just, and then give it just a few seconds, because I'm on number 9, give it just a few seconds and it'll heat right back up to where we need it. So when you're doing your rebar, because this is tinned steel is what it is. So it's steel that's very clean and it's been dipped in a vat of tin. And then we're gonna heat up our flux. And then make sure that you give the solder time to melt. So here we go. We're going to heat up the flux, and then we're going to come back in, and you can see the solder melt because it comes out the edge of your soldering iron tip. And when it does that, then just pick straight up. Don't move it, because remember, your soldering iron is not a paintbrush. And if you can get that nice little bump like that, heat it up, give it time to melt, because you can't get this too hot, other than the fact that eventually you're going to want to touch it. And I suggest you use your grousing pliers for that. And don't use your running pliers because they have rubber tips on them. But use your grousing pliers, and make sure when we attach, we're going to make sure that when we attach this rebar that it's perfectly 90 degrees. Otherwise, it's just not going to look right. So remember, flux, not a lot, but flux. And you can do 3 or 4 joints. Well, we only have 2 left down here, so we're going to slide this down so you can see what we're doing here. So remember what we want to do. We want to heat that up, give it time to melt, and pick straight up, and that gives us a nice little little raise on the reinforcing bar. Heat the flux. I'm using about maybe an eighth of solder, an eighth of an inch on the soldering roll here. Let me see. I'll check it this time and see how much I'm using. So heat it up. Give it time to melt. There we go. So I'm using about 1/4 of an inch. Let's heat that up. And I'm using a 3/8 chisel tip on a Weller 100P. Straight down and straight up. Last joint on this bad boy here. Heat up the flux. Now remember, this end and that end are both very hot. So my suggestion is you go ahead and do the other reinforcing bar, and then allow this one time to cool, because it's definitely warm. Now I did this a while ago where you watched it as we did it. So yeah, it gets pretty hot, and so we want to make sure that we can, we'll put this one, and make sure that you put it down correctly. Okay, and it is warm enough. I wouldn't set it on the glass just because. So now what we want to do here is, you can see, I don't know if you can see it here or below me, but you can see I put a mark with my Sharpie at 12 inches. And then there's one down on the bottom at 12 inches. So we want to, and you can see we have our piece notched. And so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and mark. So we're going to mark where we're going to do our soldering, and where we're attaching the reinforcing bar. So the whole idea about the reinforcing bar is to keep the glass from bellowing or bellying out. And then the other thing is you can see how this boat, I think that the camera is on the boat. You can see the boat has a bunch of vertical or horizontal lines in it, which a lot of people would classify that are hinge joints. But what I've done on the sides is I brought this piece of glass all the way up and this piece of glass on this end all the way up. And that eliminated what's called a hinge joint because these pieces are all horizontal. So now what we've done, I'm going to move my flux out of the way, and I'm going to slide this over about a 1/2 inch off of my line, and I'm going to take my wire brush and I'm going to wire brush everywhere that I have marked. I want it to be a little bit wide of it because that's where I want to solder it. And then we get right in right here. Okay. And then remember, now that goes right there and then it'll stand up. And all of this has been wire brushed underneath of it. So my rebars, and I've got them marked. I always remember to turn the top or the end that I'm working on, the top of the window, away from me and just push it out of the way down the table. And now we're ready to do exactly the same routine that we just finished. So remember, we're going to take a small amount of flux. Okay. And we're going to take a little bit of heat. And about a 1/4 inch of solder. And we're going to pick straight up, just like that. And we're going to leave a little mound. Now, sometimes when you move over to the next, to your next mark, your soldering iron should still have a little bit of solder on it. But you can lay that down right there and pick that straight up. And if you don't put enough, just straight down, let it melt, and pick straight up, just like that. So remember, this is a Weller 100P. Just like that. So another little trick to even ensure that it, it stays even better is to heat it. Flux it again, and then solder it, and you get an even better mound if you flux it the second time after you heat it. And that all really is going to depend on how hot your iron is. So we're using our Ruby Flux, and we're using our glazing compound, and then we have our soldering iron control. And this is the one that we have. This is the soldering iron control that we have on our shopping page, on our Amazon page, on our website. So when I'm using my iron control and I'm working on the rebars, I turn it up to about 9. We'll solder the joints here because the first one that we did should be cool enough. But you can see if you do flux, pick it up, allow it to cool a little bit, put some more flux on it. Look at that. Oh man, that thing's gonna roll down like nobody's business for us. So we need a little bit of flux. And when I'm using my Ruby Flux, I just put a little bit in the cap, and then when I'm done with it, I can get rid of that. And so if you don't heat it up, this is what happens. It doesn't get exactly the way it's supposed to. So you can heat it up again, pick it up, and add a little bit of solder. There you go. But if you heat it up first, and there's a little bit of solder on the tip, pick it straight up, you can see there. And then I'm gonna flux it again. And now I'm gonna give it a second to melt, and look at that mount. I mean, that's just really, that's exactly what you're looking for, because you're trying to make it easy for yourself when you're doing this particular process. So remember, flux, heat, flux, straight down, let your solder melt, and straight back up again. Now, once we start attaching this to the window, we'll get some close-ups so that you can see exactly what we're doing. And you know, you can see when your solder cools a little bit, because it's not shiny anymore. It's kind of a dull looking finish. So remember, when I'm done with my iron for a little bit, I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna clean all the dirt off of it real quick, just like that. And then I'm gonna turn it down, because we're getting ready to attach the rebars to the window as opposed to prepping them to be attached to the window. So because we're doing lead, there's no reason to use 60-40 solder. So this is 50-50 solder. I don't mind using it. Actually, I enjoy it with the lead, because it seems to flow pretty much like the lead, and it's easier for me to control the temperature so that everything works like it's supposed to without melting stuff. So you can see here, I'm gonna do this right here. I'm fluxing that. Okay. Now I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna take just a little bit of solder. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit of solder. I'm gonna apply it to the edge. Okay. So now I've applied that solder to the joint that's been cleaned. And now make sure that where I want this, which is going to be 11 7/8. Okay. So we've measured this, and we have a mark right here and right here for a joint. So Barb, she'll get up close, and we'll put the solder right there on the side. And
can't see it.
You can, all right. So there's one right below it. Here we go. We're gonna tilt the iron a little bit, catch some solder, and hold it right there on the side. Give it time to melt. Just like that, okay? So now these joints here, they're all set. We're gonna come down and we're gonna go ahead and attach the rest of these. We're gonna attach the rest of these joints that are right here. So because you've basically what I call pre-treated this with solder, it's so much easier to just come back. Now that you've got that little mound there, lay your iron on its side, add a little bit more, and then bring it straight down and give it time to melt. Now, I will say this, make sure you've got your soldering iron at the right temperature. Otherwise, you're gonna melt what you're doing, and that's not something that you want to do. Okay. Now I can come down there and straighten this out and get my 12 inches where I need it. Okay. There we go. So we're going to pull that down there. A little bit. Right here. Okay, so there you have it, guys. You can attach these rebars. Now we can pick this window up, and but first we're going to clean it up, vacuum it off, polish it a little bit more,